Hello, I'm Jay Allen from My True North, and today I want to talk about making yourself redundant. Yep, you heard me. It's about being able to sack yourself. Now don't get me wrong, I don't mean that literally, that you're no good and that you need to be able to quit and give up. I'm talking about the aspirations of most business owners to be able to create a successful business, and yet the majority of us fails to be able to do so because we don't grasp the importance of you not being centric to the business. Most people, when they set out in business, will set out on their own as a solopreneur. They might be self-employed for a few weeks or months first before they start to create a limited business and start to build a team in order to be able to grow and grow. And yet the biggest failure that most people tends to do is that they employ people to support them doing the business, and as a result they create a huge big job for themselves, which eventually the biggest bottleneck is finding somebody else to replace or duplicate you. It's alright if you're the consultant or the lead of the business to start off with, but if all you do is employ a PA and an accounts manager and a salesperson for you to continually doing the work, you're continually working in the business, then the problem is one, it isn't a sellable asset because the moment that you leave, then the business has disappeared altogether. But subsequently, everything that happens relies on you being present and generating the phenomenal or predominant income. All of the other salaries are reliant on you doing your job, and it makes taking a holiday or a weekend off almost impossible, not necessarily because the week's holiday is expensive, but the expense of not being in works to generate the income required to be able to pay other people's salary and feed mouths is so significant that you end up taking a staycation for 24 hours on a bank holiday Monday. And that's not what we set out in business to do. We tend to set out in business to create this lifestyle that we want, and we want our business to be able to generate it for us. Then we can't understand as to why it is that years later we've fallen out of love with it by all it expects from us just to be able to keep going. So I want to be able to reverse that and be able to find a means of being able to make you redundant whilst the business continues to grow. And to do that, I'm going to pose you 4 questions. I ask these 4 questions to each and every one of the clients that we work with, and they are the most difficult questions for most clients to answer. Ironically, it's taken some of our clients months to be able to find sufficient and sustainable answers to these 4 questions that are coherent and accepted by them and by us. And yet it is the key to being able to find how to release yourself from being so centric to the business that the business can then subsequently grow and grow and grow without you being the bottlenecks to its subsequent growth. So here we go. 4 questions that could very well change the way that you think about you, your business, your future, and how to be able to achieve more. Question number 1. On what date are you going to sell your business? Now don't get me wrong, if you're a reasonably new or start-up business, the chances are that the last thing that you've got in mind is selling it. At the moment you're busy building it and you want to be able to create a career for yourself and you're going to grow. And that's great if you're actually looking for a lifestyle job as opposed to growing and scaling a business. The problem with that though is the moment that you stop, it stops. The moment that you say, do you know what, I've had enough now, I want to pass it on. You can't, because you are so key and centric to it that the value of the business is you being in it. You are the business and the business is you. People start to buy from you and not from the brand, and therefore when you're not there they don't tend to buy, and there isn't any continued or very little resilient value in the business for you to be able to sell on. So when are you going to sell the business? Come up with a date. Come up with a firm date. On the 31st of December 2025, I'm going to sell the business. Now it might be that when you get to the 31st of December or the 28th or 27th, and you say, do you know what, I've chosen I'm not going to sell it yet. But the first and fundamental difference between working in the business and working on the business is actually determining as to when would you be willing to sell the business. Now don't get me wrong, most people will then start to work out, okay, so when am I going to hit 65, and therefore I'll set it a day before my 65th. Well that's great if you want to be in work until you're 65. But what happens if you could sell it for the figure that you want to sell it for when you're 35, so you can enjoy the rest of your life without having to work for a living until you're 65? What happens if you sold the business for so much money that you didn't ever have to work again, and you don't have to worry about your pension and your 65th? So on what date would you be willing to sell the business? Would you be willing? Now for some, I don't ever, regardless of how much money people sell it for, I don't want to sell this for the next 5 years because I want to see what I can do with it in 5 years' time. That's cool. I'm cool with that. But on what date would you be willing to sell your business? And I need you to come up with a date and quantify as to why that is. I want you to write it down, and then once you've written it down, I want you to share it with somebody who knows you, to hold you to account, to be able to say, would you do it? Would you be willing to sell it? And when it gets to that date, are you going to sell it? The next question is, how much are you going to sell it for? Because it's alright saying I'm going to sell my business, but when you sell your business, what's the fee that you're going to be happy to sell it for? Now, I don't want you to spend any time giving considerations to what the business is currently worth, because unless you are intending to sell the business tomorrow, then we're not talking about its current turnover or its current status. We're talking about when you are ready to sell the business, in months or years or decades time, whatever that time on that date is that you've written in question 1, when you are ready to sell the business, for how much are you happy to sell the business for? Now listen to those words carefully. For how much are you happy to sell the business for? Not how much will you accept, because that's a different question as to how happy are you to accept that. It's not how much will it be turning over, because that's a vanity number. Or how much is it worth, because that's depending on who's paying for it. How much will you be happy to sell the business for? That if the person comes to you on that date and offers you that figure, that you're happy to say, thank you very much, you can have the business, away you go, and I won't look back. Regardless of what you choose to do with it subsequently, I'm happy to accept X on Y. X being figure and Y being date. And write that figure down. But don't just write down a figure. There's nothing worse than when somebody says to me, oh, I'm going to sell it for £1 million. Okay, really? Why is that then? Why is £1 million of reference or interest to you? What is it you're going to spend that £1 million on? What is that £1 million going to do for you? Why is it 1 million and not 1,000,001 or 999,000? What's so significant about those specific 7 numbers? So before you write down that number that you're happy to receive, just at least do some sums in your head or a calculator somewhere and work out as to what you would actually need at that time in your life, whether you've still got a mortgage, whether you want a second home, whether you're happy with the car on the drive, whether you're happy with the holidays that you want to be able to take for the rest of your life without having to worry about where the money's coming from to be able to do so. Give some real due considerations to the number that you're happy to receive, that at any stage after that date in question 1, you don't go, oh, I really wish I'd asked for X instead. So quantify the number that you've come up with and then share that with the person that you share the date with. They're the first 2 questions, and ironically, already they're quite difficult to answer. You can't simply come up with them off the top of your head. You've got to do some work and some diligence and some considerations to establish as to why you've offered both of those and committed them to paper and to a friend. But if you thought those two were difficult, these are the next two, and these really are going to be a stickler for you. But they are fundamental in helping you to change your attitude towards you, your business, your role within it, and how you operate from here on in. So question 3 is, who's going to buy your business? Of all the many different companies and sectors and industries out there, of all the many different hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who might be in the markets to being able to buy a business, who are you going to sell your business to? Who do you want to be able to take over the reins when you choose to hand them over to somebody else? Who are you going to sell the business to? Interesting enough, I had a conversation yesterday with somebody that told me that they were going to sell their business to their son, that they were going to pass it to them as they retired. And although the business would then do a buyout in order that they could retire and take some cash from the 30 or 40 years that they'll have committed to their business, that they're going to pass it to their son for the son to continue the reins. And my first question was, does your son want it? Well, of course he does. We'll have built this big business that's now doing X amount per year, and there'll be staff and a job, and he won't have to clean the toilets or anything. He won't have to start at the bottom. He'll be able to come in and manage the business. He'll be able to take it full. I went, that's great. Does he want it? Well, I don't really know. He's only 3 at the moment. It's a little bit premature to ask him. Okay. What happens if he doesn't want it? Well, why wouldn't he? What's wrong with it? You see, if I think back to my childhood, when my father left employment to choose to set up business of his own, he became a driving instructor. Set up a driving school, bought a car, had some dual controls fitted, did his ADI certificate. He was already a qualified advanced motorist from his previous career, qualified as a driving instructor, started teaching people how to drive. And over the next 15-20 years he built quite a successful and significant driving school with a number of other drivers now operating under his brand and banner in and around Nottingham, in Nottinghamshire, Mansfield, Sutton, Huthwaite, Kirkby, all the way around the North Nottinghamshire area. I'm not sure, regardless of how successful my dad was with his driving school business, that I would have thanked him if he'd said, I've had enough of driving now, it's now all yours. You see, it doesn't really matter as to how much money the business made. I'm not quite sure that I ever wanted to be a driving instructor or to own a driving school. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with a driving school. They are exceptionally good professional businesses to be able to be in. But it wasn't going to float my boat. It wasn't something that I wanted to do. I wouldn't have thanked him for him to hang up his hat and hand over the keys and say, all of this, son, can now be yours. It's not something that I'd ever aspired to be. It was his dream. It was his aspirations. And although I've got 3 younger brothers, none of them are driving instructors. I don't think anyone would have wanted to have been a driving instructor in our family. And like I say, I've got nothing against driving instructors. Please don't think I'm having a dig here. It was just that was my dad's dream. It wasn't necessarily ours. So it's all right saying, well, we're going to pass it on to the family, and it's going to be we inherited it from our family, and we're going to pass it on to there's this assumption that that's what they want. And then ironically, the amount of times that I go in and help family businesses out of the quagmire that they've created, where old traditional hands over to new, and new wants to be able to go digital and technical and automated, and there's such a family wrangling, there's such a big fallout within the family because the new person, the next generation, wants to be able to take it in a different direction, and oh no, your grandfather would turn in his grave if he saw what you were doing. Well, would he? I'm not quite sure my grandfather had access to the internet when he set the business up 83 years ago. I'm sure he would be happy to know that we are now an international business as opposed to selling to just round the corner. There's this assumption that what we think is going to happen is actually going to happen. So my third question is all about who's going to buy the business. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to identify at least half a dozen, if not 10 companies that could or might be interested in buying that future business on the date that you're looking to sell it. Who might want to buy your business? It could be a local or regional or national competitor. It might be an international competitor. It might be somebody that isn't even a competitor at all, but wants to be able to bolt on the product or services that you offer to their existing business and diversify. It could be that somebody simply wants access to your client base to be able to off-sell or cross-sell or upsell or downsell their products and services and see this as a means to be able to do so. So don't just necessarily think linear about who's likely to buy the business, but give some real considerations to at least half a dozen people or businesses or sectors that might be interested in being able to buy either your business, your products, your services, your suppliers, your relationships, or at least the list, the CRM, the relationship that you have with the people who are gracing you with their time, presence and money right now. And then finally, the fourth and probably the most difficult questions to answer right now is why the hell would they pay that for it? Why on earth would answer to number 3 pay answer to number 2 on answers to number 1? Because you have got an aspiration with regards to what you believe the business is worth, and they will have an expectation of what the business is worth. And it's so damning to so many businesses that have built up their own perception of what their business is worth without giving consideration to the fact that this is what it's worth to you. And in order to be able to sell it for the multiple that you would like to be able to receive, in order to be able to receive that glorified figure in number 2 that you've determined that you're happy to receive, you've got to be able to make the business worth more than that to them. And that is the stickler that most people come across when it comes to trying to create a legacy and exiting a business successfully with a smile on their face. You've got to enable the business not to be of the set values to you, but help the company that's going to buy it from you to see its value at beyond what it is that you want to sell it for, so they're happy to make the purchase also. And ironically, if and when you can give a considered and viable answer to those 4 questions, it will completely change the way in which you think about you, your role within the business, what you do in business, and how you operate as a business. You know, it was Gerber that said all those many years ago in the E-Myth, and subsequently in the E-Myth Revisited, you've got to spend some designated daily time working on the business as opposed to continually in the business. And this is fundamental if you want to be able to create an exit plan, a successful exit plan at that, a legacy. You've got to give considerations to those 4 questions in that order and with the consideration that I've just offered you. I hope you find that helps. If you do, please look out and drop me a comment below or let me know as to what you got from today's video. And I'd look forward to being able to have a great conversation with you sometime in the near future. That's Jay Allen from My True North. I look forward to speaking to you soon.